Oh my god, I'm so small. So small.
What is going on, Internet? Welcome back to SBS. My name is Sean. This is part 2 of the 2-part series where I rebuild a Corksport turbo. If you've already watched the first episode, then you know that this turbo I bought used and it happened to have blown oil seals. So I had to buy a whole new bearing replacement kit. I'm gonna go over what kit I bought later on in the episode, but we are also going to be porting and polishing the wastegate port and the path leading to it. If you are new to this channel, please consider subscribing if you find that some of the content actually speaks to you and you enjoy it. If you find that this very video actually helps you in the decision of buying a used turbo that happens to be a Corksport, or just buying used things in general and you have the idea of maybe wanting to repair them to use them, like this video. It lets me know if I'm doing something good or if I just have really bad ideas. I'll be honest, I'm starting to think this was a very bad idea. But I hope you stick around to see this thing get repaired. Let's get to it. Now, before we go any further with this episode, I need to give a very big thank you to Corksport. I was dealing with Zach from the sales department, and he put me through to Daniel, and Daniel gave me all the information that I needed to get the appropriate bearing replacement kit for this turbo. Corksport didn't have any responsibility to help me. They didn't have to give me any information. So I would like to give a very big thank you to the people over at Corksport, Daniel, Barrett, and Zach, the guy that I was dealing with in sales. They're an exceptional company. The fact that they went above and beyond what they had to. I didn't buy the turbo from them. I bought this turbo used off of Kijiji, and these guys helped me by giving me some information about this turbo and how it's built, what components it uses. So thank you, Corksport. They are a stand-up company. So now that I have that covered, let's get into this turbine housing and we'll try porting it, and then we'll finish it off with a nice mirror finish polish if I can make it do that. So that exhaust gas is able to divert to the wastegate flapper and port more easily. I'm pretty sure that more yep, no, that's a sentence. Okay, so now looking at our turbine housing, I'm gonna start porting it right where that lip is, right down in there. So we're gonna remove that with just a carbide bit. We're using the squared off bit. I do have other bits. I have a rounded tip bit, like one that actually just looks like a ball. I also have one that looks similar to that. And we're also gonna be using an assortment of different bits to try and polish after we remove all the material that we need to remove. So you can see right down in there, I got rid of that step that was inside the porthole. So now that we've got rid of that, we can start to enlarge the rest of the port and round things off in areas like this. Right in there, and try and ease the pathway for the exhaust gas to escape through this port. And then after we've eased the transition from the exhaust gas going in there, then we can enlarge this port just slightly on this side. I say only this side because when you close that flapper, you can maybe remove around 1 millimeter all the way around here. Because don't forget, this flapper is 28 millimeter and that port is only 24 millimeter. So we can maybe take that out to 25, 26 mil at the most. I don't think it's very safe to go any larger than that, just because that flapper is so tiny that if we do go larger than that, your turbo will almost never spool. You'll constantly be leaking exhaust gas out through that porthole instead of it going to your turbine wheel and spinning the shaft. You're probably thinking to yourself, what the hell is he doing? Well, this is about a 25.5 mil mag light. That's what the tip is. So my goal is to basically try and get this mag light just to slide through that port. If this fits through, then I know that I've enlarged the port as much as I could possibly go without potentially cracking something or maybe the wastegate leaking at small boost, mid boost, high boost, all the boost. So once I can fit this through there, then I know that it's time to polish and just stop heavily removing material. At this point, you might also be thinking, wasn't he just talking about a 34 or a 31 millimeter flapper in the previous video? You're right, I was. My thought process is, if I can't stop the boost creep by porting and polishing what I already have, well then the next step is to try and source just a 34 or slightly smaller millimeter flapper itself. If I can't source something like that, then I'll have to try and makeshift something. And by that I mean maybe buy a 37 mil flapper and then have it machined smaller and then somehow affix it to the flapper arm and make it all work properly. And if I can't do that, then last resort is I will have to purchase Corksport's revised turbine housing, which is again another 200 US, which is something like 350, 360 Canadian. And then I'd also have to pay the shipping on that, as well as the customs fee, because I imagine it's something that's actually cast in the States. I don't know for sure, but that turbine housing might be made in the States. And if it is, I don't know if you know about tariffs, but pay out the ass. So you can see I'm getting closer and closer to having a good sized port. This mag light doesn't quite fit through, but maybe if I kick it. I'll just have to keep grinding away with our carbide bit, and hopefully I can get it to 25.5 mil, which is again the size of the tip of this mag light. So let's keep going. Alright, so it may look like I did a lot more work without filming, and yeah, it's because I did. Basically what I did was I tried to round as many corners as possible so that you don't have any sharp changes in direction. Everything kind of smoothly transitions into itself. And if it looks like I polished this a little bit, I did just a tiny bit. That way you're able to see where your inconsistencies are when you're using a carbide bit. So if I'm coming in here with a carbide bit, but I'm too heavy in one spot and I don't move around enough, if I go over it with one of these sanding flapper discs or flapper wheels or whatever, it'll show me where I was too heavy in one spot, because this will try to polish everything, but if it looks like there's a low spot, well, that's where I sat too long in one position with my carbide bit. So every once in a while, go around with like a 60, 80 sanding flapper wheel, just so that you can see where your high and low spots are. I also ported out the port a little bit more. I can't quite fit the flashlight through, but that's about as much as I'm able to go. This flapper is like right on the edge of where I'm able to port. Because this arm, yeah, see how there's play in it? This wheel will have play side to side and front to back as it's doing its job, going up and down, right? So you can really only port it so much. So I didn't quite get to 25.5 mil. I probably got closer to 25.2 mil or something like that. So that's about as good as I can do, unfortunately. But the biggest thing was I worked on the transitions. So transitioning out from the turbine inlet through the wastegate, it's nice and smooth in there. There's no sharp edges. Same with all the other angles. I was able to ease the transition of where the turbo inlet is to where the wastegate is. You can see like there's a bunch of material that I removed from there. You couldn't even see the other side of the wastegate port when looking at it before. So there's a great deal of material that I removed in here. But where the sharp edge is, right at the back, that's actually where the side of the scroll for the turbine housing is. So it kind of squares off there in general on the way to the wheel, because it has to force the exhaust gas directly at a certain part of your turbine wheel. So the fact that it's squared off all the way down, that's not a big concern. Now we just need to finish polishing everything up and it should technically be good to go. So now I'm gonna finish polishing this up with more of our flapper wheels, and it takes time. It's been 2 hours of me doing this. Okay, so here we have what most people would consider a finished product. You don't have to go with any finer of a sandpaper or a sandpaper flapper wheel, whatever you want to call it. I've opened up the port, so now it's about 25.2 millimeters instead of the 24 that it came as. I tried to keep the same shape that the turbine housing had when I got it. I just wanted to make everything larger and more smooth. So you could run it like this, but I'm actually gonna go one step further. I'm gonna use some 600 grit sandpaper. You don't need to do this, but this is just for me. I wanna make sure that I don't have to upgrade the flapper. So I'm just gonna try and make this as smooth as I can with the resources that I have. So this is after about 45 minutes of using 600 grit sandpaper and just doing it by hand without a flap wheel. And I mean, yeah, it might be overkill, but this is This is what you do when you don't really want to spend money on more parts. Now, in order to make this flow the best that I can, on the other side of the turbine housing, I actually tried to remove some material and just even it out so it doesn't have all the pitting from the cast marks. Doing this just means that the exhaust gas is going to flow around the flapper as best as it can. This causes the least amount of turbulence as possible. So now that we have the turbine housing done, we're going to move on to reassembling that CHRA and then going to get it balanced. Okay, so we have our disassembled center housing here, and I'm going to be cleaning this before we reassemble everything. So I still have an O-ring around the perimeter of the center housing as well as an O-ring in the center. And there's also 2 spring C-clips right down in there. So I have to find a way to get those out somehow. And then I'm basically going to be cleaning this with a solvent cleaner or a parts cleaner. This needs to be completely dry and free of any solvents or water or anything before you reassemble it, or you could have some really bad issues with basically your turbo failing prematurely. It could be like 100 miles, it could be 1,000 miles, but you want to make sure that it is completely clean, free of debris, and free of any solvents when you're reassembling. Okay, so now we have the CHRA completely disassembled. We got both O-rings out, both C-clips out. Now let's go wash this thing in our wash tank. Now when you're working with any type of solvent like this, you need proper protection. Safety glasses aren't the best. Goggles are preferred because they have the wraparound style. They actually seal around your face, protecting your eyes. But some eye protection is better than no eye protection. You really should use some type of gas mask, but you shouldn't be breathing this stuff in, regardless of what solvent you're using. Whether you're using methyl hydrate or rubbing alcohol, you really should not be breathing in those vapors without any type of respirator. Now to clean off the really hard stuff that's really caked on, the burnt oil, I'm gonna be using this Scotch-Brite pad in combination with the solvent. For everything else, I'm just gonna use the paintbrush and try and brush stuff away, any of the loose dirt and crap that I can. So let's clean this thing up so I can reassemble and put it on the car eventually. So the solvent that we were using was by Clean Flow. It's just a mineral spirit, nothing special, but it's good for removing grease, oil, tar, whatever. It's an actual parts cleaning solvent, so it's meant for stuff like this. It's very gentle on the part that you're washing. It's not going to erode anything. Even though the center housing is cast iron, it's not a very brittle part, so you don't need to really worry about that. But I just wanted to be sure by using one of the more gentle cleaning solvents that I could to make sure that I don't wreck anything while cleaning this. We now have our center housing clean, and I'm just going to go through it with some rubbing alcohol, some 99% pure isopropyl, just to make sure that I remove anything that could be obstructing any of the pathways for the coolant or the oil. Make sure there's no residue left on any of the bearing surfaces, and then just blow it out with some compressed air, and then we'll start to reassemble. So I feel like now would be a good time to mention the bearing kit that I bought to rebuild this Corksport turbo. I actually decided to take a gamble, and well, I mean, There's no actual branding on here, but this is a Turbolab America upgraded TD05, TD06 bearing replacement kit. This actually has an upgraded 18mm thrust spacer versus the regular 14mm thrust spacer, which is in every other Mitsubishi TD05, TD06 standard bearing replacement kit. Now here we have the standard bearing kit that I took out of the Corksport Turbo, and here we have the Turbolab America upgraded bearing replacement kit. If you can spot the difference, you get a cookie. The main difference here is this. This little guy right here, this is your thrust spacer. And this, on the regular TD05, is the same piece. If you measure the diameter of this, you will see that this one is about 14.73 millimeters. Now if you measure this one, it's 17.94, so just shy of 18 millimeters. So going off of Turbolab America's website and watching some of his YouTube videos, the reason that you want to go with an upgraded spacer like this is because of how it mates against the actual thrust bearing itself. This inner face is what actually seats against your thrust bearing. So the more surface area you have gripping onto your thrust bearing, the better the wear and the better the performance of the turbo, the longevity of the turbo. When you have such a small piece gripping on your thrust bearing, you see how much surface area is left not being used? That means that will actually wear into the thrust bearing sooner because you have less wear area. They also have upgraded oil passages on the thrust bearing as well. So you see it has two holes there, leading into there, and into the center where the shaft slides through. So oiling is also vastly improved with this upgraded thrust bearing. Now this is in no way a push for Turbolab America parts. I'm not affiliated with them at all. I did not receive this kit free. I paid for this with my own money. There's no sponsorship, none of that crap. This is just me trying to experiment a little bit. This is also a very good way for me to learn what does and does not work and how not to break. I could have gone with the regular Kinugawa or Mamba turbo bearing replacement kit, but I decided to try this upgraded kit that I saw on Amazon, of all places. Just wanted to give it a shot. See what happens. See if I can get better performance and longevity out of this Corksport Turbo without having any issues. Now in the first video in this series, I accidentally referred to the turbine wheel as 18G. This is actually in fact a TD05H wheel. Oddly enough, Mitsubishi uses the TD05 nomenclature to refer to both the turbine wheel, shaft, center section, and the exhaust housing. The H in the TD05 model number actually refers to the style of turbine wheel used. 18G actually refers to your compressor wheel, and the G actually stands for the staggered height of your fins on the compressor wheel. And that can get super confusing, especially when you have a somewhat custom turbo like this Corksport Turbo. The wheel that it uses on the compressor side, it is an 18G wheel, but it's not your standard 18G wheel. It is modified. It has the extended tips, just like what you would see on a Borg-Warner wheel, but it's a Mitsubishi wheel. So now that I covered the bearing replacement kit, the turbine wheel, and the compressor wheel, let's finally rebuild this turbo in the next part of this series. Yeah, originally this was going to be a two-part video, but this one actually went a little bit longer than what I was anticipating. So I'm actually going to split this up into 3 videos, this being the second episode. I already know that there's at least one person out there that is just screaming, "Why the f*** are you doing this?" At their computer screen. I'm trying my best to make these videos shorter because I realize not everybody has a half hour to spend just watching YouTube videos. At least of all my YouTube videos when there are way better channels out there. So I'm trying to make these a little bit more digestible. I think that is, pretty sure that's a term. I'm gonna stick with it. So the next part in this now 3-part video series will be out very soon. and I will have more information about some of the issues that I actually ran into when playing around with this turbo that I didn't cover in this video. But if you haven't done so already, please check me out on Instagram at SBS Cars. I upload random stuff on there all the time, and you'll actually get to see me doing work that I haven't actually posted in a YouTube video yet. Pro tip for anybody out there that actually wants to start a YouTube channel, don't do it when you have a baby, because this is the amount of time that you actually get to work on cars or do anything. But check me out on Instagram, like and subscribe to this YouTube channel if you like what I'm doing or if I actually helped you out, and I will see you guys in the next part very, very soon.